mind is an empire, yet the vast majority have surrendered it without offering even a hint of resistance. They flung open the gates to noise, to distraction, to visceral fear, and today, they obey forces they do not even possess the language to comprehend. You look around and see no visible chains, no iron bars, no masters barking orders with a whip. Yet, there is a structure, an invisible architecture, carefully designed by social engineering to keep you docile, reactive, and pitifully predictable. If you do not colonize your own mind, someone else will colonize it for you. This is the cruelest, most fundamental principle that Niccolò Machiavelli understood before anyone else. True power is not held by those who govern bodies or territories. It is held by those who govern ideas. The mental trick that awakens a dominant mind is not magic, nor is it that cheap, dopamine-fueled motivation you scroll past every day. It is mental discipline fused with cold, surgical strategy. Most people operate under the cognitive bias that controlling the mind means shutting down emotion, becoming a robot. This is a fatal error. Control is not repression. Repression only buries the trauma until it explodes. True control means understanding every emotion as a messenger raw data that reveals your weaknesses, your obsessions, and your psychological blind spots. It is not about suppressing the impulse. It is about directing the kinetic energy of that impulse. Understand this. The man who does not master his rage will be enslaved by the one who knows how to provoke it. The man who does not govern his desire will be the eternal servant of the one who awakens it. This is basic behavioral psychology. Dominion begins the precise microsecond you are able to observe a stimulus without immediately triggering a reaction. Think about the neurochemistry of your daily existence. Every word you listen to, every image you consume, every conversation you engage in is actively rewiring your neural pathways. It is molding your perception of reality through neuroplasticity. The weak call this influence. The strong, the architects of society, call it intentional programming. You have two choices. Remain a byproduct of your environment, a victim of social proof, or become the architect of your own perception. That is the only difference that matters between those who live on autopilot, governed by the status quo bias, and those who move the pieces on the board. Dark psychology is not merely a manual for manipulating others. That is a shallow interpretation. It is a brutal mirror that forces you to witness exactly how you have been manipulated your entire life. From the moment you were a child, you were taught what to desire, what to fear, and what to consider moral. Your mind was programmed using Pavlovian rewards and punishments until you learned to punish yourself. And that mechanism is still alive in your cortex today. You compare yourself. You sabotage yourself. You rationalize your failures. You believe you are making free choices, but you are not. You are simply executing a pattern imposed upon you by a system that profits from your insecurity. To dominate your mind, you must break this cycle of operant conditioning. You must dare to question the neurobiological roots of why you feel what you feel, why you act as you act, and why you repeat the same errors in a loop of confirmation bias. There is no change possible without a violent self-confrontation. This is why this specific mental shift is not for the masses. The average psyche cannot withstand it because it demands that you look at yourself without the mask. It demands that you destroy the comfortable lies that preserved your ego. It demands a symbolic death. You must let the person you were die so that the person who thinks for themselves can be born. The mind of the master is a mind that has stared into its own shadow and didn't blink. It does not fear its darkness. It integrates it. It doesn't run from impulses. It analyzes them, transforms them, and converts them into controlled energy. Here lies the chasm between the mediocre man who overflows with reactive anger and the strategist who transmutes that anger into precision. It is the difference between the one who reacts emotionally to an offense and the one who utilizes that offense to measure the psychological character of the provoker. Do you want to awaken a mind that dominates? You must begin with observation. Constant observation is the razor's edge of the mental sword. You are not observing to judge yourself. Judgment is emotional and useless. You are observing to detect patterns. Every automatic reaction is a gateway into your subconscious programming. Every irrational fear is an opportunity for cognitive reframing. Observation transforms the slave into the architect, the impulsive animal into the grand strategist. While the masses act without thinking, driven by the amygdala, you learn to engage the prefrontal cortex before moving a muscle. Machiavelli said that men are so simple and so obedient to their present necessities that he who deceives will always find someone ready to be deceived. Now you understand why the masses are so easily manipulated. It is because their minds are noisy, their emotions are volatile, and their thinking is shallow, trapped in the immediate gratification of the present moment. But when you silence that internal noise, you begin to perceive what others are blind to. You start to notice the micro-expressions, the contradictions in people's words, the hidden intentions behind their benevolent gestures, the vested interests masked by their speeches. This is the genesis of true power, seeing the invisible. The mental trick boils down to a silent, almost monastic practice, emotional detachment in the face of external manipulation. When someone attempts to provoke you, do not grant them the satisfaction of a reaction. Freeze the moment, observe, analyze. Ask yourself, why does this person seek this reaction from me? What do I lose if I yield? What bias are they trying to exploit? Every time you succeed in remaining impassive before a provocation, you have reclaimed a territory of your mind, and every territory you reclaim increases your sovereignty. With time, you will notice that most people live entirely at the mercy of their environment. They change their opinions according to the social wind. They are offended by trifles. They are altered by the trivial. They do not do this because they want to. They do it because their mind does not belong to them. They are merely leaves blown by currents of information, collective hysteria, and mental trends. But not you. You learn to stand immobile in the center of the chaos, not because you do not feel you are human, you feel, but because you know that every uncontrolled emotion is a weapon that can be turned against you. The mind that dominates does not feed on external validation. It feeds on silence. In that silence, it discovers the truth behind the appearance. You learn not to react to flattery, which appeals to your vanity, nor to insults, which appeal to your insecurity. You learn to observe without judgment, because judgment weakens the intellect, while silence strengthens the will. Whoever achieves this state of serenity, while the rest of the world is losing its mind, dominates the psychological terrain of their environment. But this must be practical. It begins with micro-actions. When you feel the biological urge to respond immediately to a message, stop. Inhibit the impulse. When something irritates you, breathe and engage your analytical mind rather than your reactive mind. When someone tries to confuse you with complex lies, maintain absolute silence and let their own incoherence expose them. This process seems deceptively simple, yet few manage to sustain it. Why? Because the ego cannot tolerate stillness. The ego is addicted to friction. It wants to react. It wants to be right. It wants to feel important. But you must understand that this very ego is the chain that keeps you submissive. The mental trick consists of observing the ego without fusing with it, a state psychologists call metacognition or dissociation. You watch the ego scream for attention, but you do not identify with its impulses. When you achieve this separation, you become the strategist of your own self. Life ceases to be a chaotic battlefield where you are a casualty. It becomes a chessboard where you choose every movement with surgical precision. Dominating the mind does not turn you into someone cold and unfeeling. It turns you into someone dangerous. Dangerous because no one can use your emotions against you. No one can drag you into their game if you are the one deciding the rules. Dark psychology, in this context, transforms from a weapon of offense into a tool of absolute defense. It allows you to anticipate the intentions of others through predictive processing, without them ever realizing they are being scanned. Remember this: he who controls his thoughts controls his destiny, but he who controls his emotions controls those around him. Not through external manipulation, but through internal stability. The unstable inherently fear the firm. The insecure subconsciously follow the secure. The weak obey those who do not tremble. Therefore, true dominion requires neither shouting nor threats. It requires only presence, silence, and a mind that does not bend. When you reach that point, when you understand that nothing external can disturb your internal equilibrium without your permission, you become a force that does not need to demonstrate power, because power already flows from within. Mental dominion is not demonstrated by speaking. It is demonstrated by deciding in silence. Common men seek control over their environment, a futile attempt, as the world is entropic. Intelligent men seek control over themselves. Everything begins with a question that few dare to formulate. Who is really dictating my thoughts? If the answer is society, the education system, your parents' trauma, or fear, then you are not the owner of your mind. You are merely a tenant in it. Machiavelli understood that power is not conquered by shouting orders, but by modeling perceptions. And you, by awakening your mind, become that type of strategist, one who no longer reacts to the symptoms, but designs the causes of others' reactions. The mental trick is not just resisting external influences, it is learning to generate them. When you observe how others respond to their own emotions, you learn to detect the invisible strings of their behavior. The anxious person seeks approval to soothe their cortisol levels. The arrogant person fears weakness because of a fragile self-esteem. The aggressive person hides profound insecurity. All human beings are governed by basic psychological needs. Whoever understands these needs dominates. And whoever dominates does not need to impose. A single word or a strategic silence is sufficient. Dark psychology teaches you something the system fears you will discover. People do not move by logic, they move by emotion. Logic is merely the post hoc rationalization, the excuse that arrives later to justify what they had already decided to feel. If you understand this, you become an architect of influence, not because you manipulate maliciously, but because you perceive the root of every reaction. You understand what drives them, what scares them, what binds them. This allows you to remain free while others act from their chains. Mental dominion implies 3 phases. The first is deprogramming. This involves questioning everything you have taken for granted: beliefs, habits, ideologies, even your core values. Everything must pass through the fire of doubt. If a belief survives the fire, it is yours. If it burns, it was an imposition. The mediocre man fears doubt because his identity is parasitic. It depends on what he believes. The dominant mind, however, destroys its certainties to rebuild itself stronger. The second phase is reconstruction. You must create your own principles, not the ones told to you in school or church, but the ones you choose after observing reality without filters. The world does not reward naive goodness. It rewards conscious intelligence. This is not about being cruel. It is about understanding that morality without strategy is simply vulnerability. You must choose your values with the same precision with which a warrior chooses his weapon. And the third phase is projection. This is learning to influence. Here, the mind becomes a polished mirror that reflects exactly what others need to see to move in the direction you choose. The secret is not in lying, but in understanding the mechanism of validation. Most people starve to feel understood, heard, and validated. When you give them that sensation, they lower their cognitive defenses. And in that open space, you can plant ideas that germinate as if they were their own. The mind that dominates does not impose. It suggests. It does not argue. It redirects. It does not seek attention. It attracts it through gravity. The difference between a manipulator and a strategist is that the first seeks control out of fear of abandonment, while the second no longer fears losing control. His security comes from self-knowledge, not from external approval. That calm is magnetic. To awaken this mind, you must practice emotional distance. Observe people speaking, acting, promising. Do not rush to judge. Listen to the tone more than the words. Prosody reveals more than syntax. Observe the pauses more than the gestures. The body reveals what the mouth attempts to hide. If you manage to read this nonverbal language, you will have an advantage that few possess: the ability to understand the truth behind the mask. Remember, Society trains people to react, not to analyze. They want you emotional because the emotional human is a predictable consumer. The one who feels without filtering buys what is sold to them, fears what is told to them, and loves what destroys them. This is why mental dominion begins with slowness, thinking before feeling, acting after comprehending. The one who anticipates his emotion dominates. The one who lets himself be dragged by the amygdala hijack obeys. Machiavelli understood this better than anyone. Power does not reside in facts, but in the interpretation of facts, the framing effect. Whoever controls the narrative controls the minds of others. Therefore, you must be ruthlessly careful about what you repeat to yourself. Every thought you allow to enter becomes a brick in the structure of your identity. If you repeat weak ideas, you activate neural pathways of weakness. If you repeat strong ideas, your mind hardens like steel. Conduct an experiment. For a full day, audit your internal dialogue. Every time your mind says, "I can't," change it to, "How can I do this?" This is not positive thinking. It is linguistic reprogramming. "I can't" is a stop command to the brain. "How" is a search command. Every time you think, "This is difficult," substitute it with, "This trains me." You are not deceiving yourself. You are engaging in cognitive reframing. A thought is not a description of the world. It is an order your mind executes. If you give it orders of defeat, it navigates you to failure. If you give it instructions of strategy, it creates solutions. A mind that dominates no longer asks if it can. It calculates how. It does not complain about circumstances. It analyzes how to exploit them. While others look for someone to blame, falling into the fundamental attribution error, the strategist looks for angles. That mental difference converts the average individual into a follower, and the strategist into a leader. Another key to mental dominion is the control of the sensory environment. What you see, hear, and consume programs your mental state through mirror neurons. Dominated minds feed on noise, news, scandals, and cheap dopamine hits. Dominating minds seek silence, select knowledge, and stimuli that strengthen their clarity. You cannot think with precision if you are surrounded by chaos. External chaos feeds internal chaos, and internal chaos destroys power. Your room, your conversations, your routine, everything must reflect your intention of dominion. If you live among disorder, your mind will be a reflection of that disorder. If you surround yourself with empty people, their emptiness will infect you through social contagion. This is not about isolating yourself from the world, but about filtering with whom and with what you share your attention. Attention is the most valuable currency of the 21st century. Whoever controls attention controls the market, and whoever controls the market of attention governs minds. Mental dominion, then, is an internal political act, a rebellion against invisible slavery. Modern society does not need physical chains because it has digital distractions. They offer you entertainment to numb your hunger for freedom. They give you immediate rewards to prevent you from seeking long-term purpose. They offer you superficial belonging so you do not discover your individual power. Breaking this cycle requires courage, because the moment you stop following the rhythm of the mass, they will call you arrogant, cold, or insensitive. But it is not coldness, it is strategy. While they seek to feel good, you seek to understand. While they share their unformed opinions, you observe in silence. And when everyone loses control, you make decisions that place you above the chaos. The mental trick of dominion is not about simulating strength. It is about mutating into the type of entity that no longer needs to demonstrate it. The weak exhibit power, the strong contain it. There is nothing more terrifying to the primitive human brain than an individual who thinks without getting upset, acts without announcing, and dominates without uttering a single threat. If you achieve this homeostasis, the world ceases to intimidate you. You understand that fear does not stem from external danger, but from a lack of internal control. When you control your mind, you can stand in the center of the hurricane and continue to execute decisions with surgical precision. This is the fundamental difference between the common man and the dominant. The first reacts to the wind. The second adjusts the sails. Mental dominion is the only true freedom, because he who dominates his mind dominates his timeline. This is a silent art forged in the brutal fire of solitude. No strategist is born in the middle of the noise. Noise belongs to the masses. Calm belongs to the king. And to be a king in the terrain of the mind, you must first learn to withstand the void. Not the void of having nothing, but the void of needing nothing. The average man requires constant external stimuli to feel alive. He is a dopamine addict. The man who dominates his mind is self-sustaining. He is his own source. This is the bifurcation between those who seek distraction and those who create reality. The first depends on the world, the second governs it. But arriving at this state requires a brutal process: unlearning. Mental dominion is not about acquiring more information. It is about deleting the false certainties that keep you asleep. Ask yourself, how many of your emotions are genuinely yours? How many of your desires were born from your soul? And how many are merely mimetic desires implanted by a screen? Every foreign thought you accept as your own becomes an invisible shackle. This is how the system governs without the need for physical whips. It convinces you that freedom is the ability to consume more, to posture more, to react more. The mind that dominates disconnects from that game. It learns to distinguish between the essential and the superfluous. It understands that power lies not in possession, but in the absence of need. Because when you do not need anything, there is no way to buy you. And when no one can buy you, you become incorruptible. The one who dominates his mind does not seek to impress. He seeks clarity. He does not seek attention. He seeks internal power. Therefore, every decision is calculated, not by fear, but by purpose. Machiavelli knew this. The man who cannot inhibit his impulses cannot control his destiny, and he who does not dominate his destiny ends up serving the destiny of another. The mental trick, the one that awakens a dominant mind, has a root deeper than most imagine. It is not just emotional control, it is self-governance. It means being your own sovereign without depending on external motivation to move. While the rest of the world looks for inspiration to act, you act because you have decided who you are. When you reach that level, your actions cease to be reactions. They become silent declarations of authority. Think of the mind as an empire divided between reason and emotion. If emotion governs, reason becomes a servant, a lawyer hired to justify the crimes of the feelings. If reason governs alone, the human becomes a machine. But when both work in harmony under the command of the will, the individual becomes invincible. This is what the ancients called the higher mind, not a larger intellect, but a firmer will. Because in the long game of life, it is not the smartest who wins, it is the most stable. And stability is not inherited, it is trained through neurodiscipline. The majority cannot tolerate their own minds. They cannot sit alone in a room for 5 minutes without a digital distraction. This inability to endure silence is the mark of the submissive, because whoever does not dominate their silence will be manipulated by the noise. This is why the powerful have always sought to control the media, the narrative, the conversation. They know that whoever controls the noise controls the collective emotions, and whoever controls the collective emotions governs men without them ever noticing the leash. You must do the opposite. You must govern your internal noise. Every thought is a voice. Every emotion is a force. If you do not order them, they invade you. But if you order them, they work for you. Your mind is not your enemy. It is an army waiting for discipline, and it only obeys the commander who demonstrates authority. That authority is earned through coherence. Every time you break a promise to yourself, your mind stops obeying you. You lose self-efficacy. Every time you do what you said you would do, you reinforce your internal authority. Dominion is not achieved by affirmations in the mirror. It is achieved by repeated actions that engrave obedience into your own subconscious. True mental power emerges when your mind trusts you. When you cease to be the prisoner of your thoughts and become their architect. From there, anything you imagine begins to materialize, not through mysticism, but through direction. Because a trained mind directs its kinetic energy toward a single point, and what is kept focused long enough ends up manifesting. Do not confuse dominion with rigidity. Rigidity is weakness disguised as strength. The rigid breaks. The flexible adapts without losing its form. This is how strategists act. They do not oppose the flow of the world. They utilize it. They do not try to control the uncontrollable. They dominate what they can, their interpretation. Because nothing external can affect you without your mental consent. You can lose money, reputation, or even status. But if you maintain internal control, you will recover everything. Conversely, the one who loses his mind, even if he possesses everything, is already lost. The mind that dominates does not seek enemies. It seeks scenarios. It does not fight for ego. It fights for position. And every word, every gesture, every silence becomes a piece on the board. The mediocre responds to facts. The strategist designs them. This is the essence of Machiavellian thought. Understanding that morality without intelligence is weakness, and intelligence without control is self-destruction. The balance between the two is the point where the individual transcends their human condition. Dark psychology, when misunderstood, is used to subjugate others, but true mental Machiavellianism consists of first subjugating your own chaos. Because a chaotic mind cannot manipulate, it only reacts. But a disciplined mind can observe the madness of others without being contaminated by it. It can enter the minds of others, understand their logic, anticipate their next step, and without moving a finger, direct the result. This is the level where dominion becomes art. You no longer need to control directly because the environment responds to your internal state. People feel your energy, your serenity, your silent power. The one who dominates does not scream. His mere presence commands. Others perceive it as confidence, but it is more than that. It is total coherence between thought, word, and action. And that coherence generates respect, even in those who envy you. But the price of dominion is high. It demands solitude. It demands discipline. It demands renouncing mental comfort. The lazy mind seeks immediate pleasure, the dopamine hit. The strong mind seeks purpose. And between these two paths, the destiny of a man is decided. Pleasure distracts, purpose orders. That is why great strategists do not seek to feel good. They seek to understand. Because to understand is to control. And to control is to dominate. From that understanding, you will see the world with new eyes. You will notice that others reveal their weakness in every word. The anxious person betrays themselves in their haste. The liar betrays themselves in their excess of detail. The manipulator betrays themselves in their need to justify. While everyone exposes themselves, you keep silence. While they seek to demonstrate strength, you observe their cracks, and thus, without doing anything, you begin to dominate. Mental dominion is the end of naivety. You stop believing in the spontaneous goodness of the world, but you do not become a cynic. You become lucid. You learn that darkness is not fought with light, but with comprehension. Because only by understanding the dark can you prevent it from consuming you. This is the true awakening. Not a mystical one, but a psychological one. The moment you understand that there is no salvation outside your own mind, all external power is temporal. Internal power is eternal. And when you reach that point, silence ceases to be empty and becomes presence. You no longer seek to dominate anyone because the need has vanished. You have won the game that everyone else is unaware they are playing. There comes a point where mental dominion transcends strategy and calcifies into nature. You no longer feign calm. You are calm. You no longer simulate power. You are power. In this state, your mind stops reacting to stimuli and starts interpreting them through cognitive appraisal. Every hostile word, every foreign gesture, every clumsy attempt at manipulation becomes raw data. The weak man perceives everything as a personal attack. The dominant man analyzes everything as information. Here lies the chasm between the one who survives and the one who reigns. Most people seek to dominate others because they feel impotent within their own skin. They want to control their spouse, their employees, or their children because they cannot control their own dopamine loops or their own cortisol spikes. But true mental dominion is not about subjugation. It is about comprehending the deterministic mechanisms that govern human conduct, because only he who comprehends human nature can predict it, and only he who predicts it can direct it. The mental trick of a mind that dominates boils down to one word: observation. Not the superficial observation of the tourist, but the deep, forensic observation of the scientist. The strategist does not focus on what people say. He focuses on what they avoid saying. He does not focus on the emotion they display, which is often a performance, but on the emotion they are desperate to hide. He learns to read the silence more than the words, the micro-movements more than the promises. And when he masters this reading, he no longer needs to ask questions. He knows the mind that dominates lives in a state of conscious alertness, but never paranoia. There is a critical neurological difference. Paranoia is the fear of losing control. It is stress-based. Conscious alertness knows that control is never lost, only temporarily delegated. The paranoid man sees enemies everywhere. The strategist sees patterns. While the paranoid man consumes himself in anxiety, the strategist uses fear as a map, because every fear reveals a direction that others avoid, and in that direction lies opportunity. Machiavelli understood that men do not fundamentally change. They merely adapt to incentives. The man who understands this stops expecting the world to be fair or logical. He accepts that human nature, driven by evolutionary biology, is inherently selfish, emotional, and inconsistent. Instead of being offended by this reality, he utilizes it. The strategist does not complain about hypocrisy. He calculates it. He does not condemn weakness. He leverages it. He does not hate manipulation. He dominates it. He knows that morality often shifts depending on one's position in the power hierarchy. What is evil for the weak is often strategic for the one who governs. Mental dominion consists of accepting this brutal truth without falling into cynicism. The cynic sees the corruption of the world and surrenders in despair. The strategist sees it and smiles because he has found the manual of human behavior. Understanding the ego, the vanity, the fear, and the ambition of others allows you to anticipate their decisions. And he who anticipates wins without fighting. Every human interaction is a negotiation of power, even if the naive fail to perceive it. From a banal conversation to a romantic relationship, everything is an exchange of attention, of energy, of validation. If you do not understand this dynamic, you become the product of the other person's desire. But if you understand it, you direct the exchange. You do not give what they ask for. You give what keeps them engaged. You do not show what you feel. You show what generates the desired effect. You do not say what you think. You say what moves the pieces. This is the language of dominion. The mental trick is perfected when you learn to surgically separate your identity from your role. The weak mix the two. They believe that being rejected in a role means they are worthless as an entity. But the one who dominates understands that every interaction is a stage, and every stage demands a specific persona, a mask. Sometimes you will play the role of the cold observer, sometimes the wise counselor, sometimes the one who knows nothing. The role does not matter. The result matters. In life, those who confuse authenticity with vulnerability expose their jugular to the predator. Authenticity is not about showing everything to everyone. It is about choosing yourself above all else. Dominating your mind also means dominating your image. The man who dominates does not let the world interpret his face at random. He constructs a face. He learns to use his presence as a tool. He does not fake. He designs. He knows when to speak with firmness and when to use a strategic pause to let the silence do the heavy lifting. He knows when to show doubt to make the other person reveal too much, and when to offer respect to purchase loyalty. Every gesture is a tactic, and yet there is no artifice. There is only consciousness. The manipulator lies to survive. The dominant chooses his truth to govern. Therefore, while others act to be accepted, the one who dominates acts to be remembered. Dark psychology teaches that every human being is driven by three core drivers: recognition, control, and security. If you manage to identify which of the three dominates a person's psyche, you hold the keys to their mind. The one who seeks recognition will be enslaved by flattery. The one who seeks control will be terrified by uncertainty. The one who seeks security will bow before a threat or a strong protector. Most people are a mixture of the three, but one always predominates. This is the lever. Knowing their internal hierarchy of desire allows you to bypass their logic and speak directly to their limbic system. The error of many is using this knowledge to inflict harm. But the conscious Machiavellian does not seek slaves. He seeks freedom. And freedom is only reached when you understand that others are also prisoners of their own minds. You no longer judge them. You analyze them. They no longer offend you. They educate you. Every reaction they have is a reflection of their chains, not of your value. When you comprehend this, you liberate yourself from the crushing weight of social proof. You stop needing the herd to tell you where to go. From this point, the mind enters its highest state, selective indifference. Not indifference toward everything that is depression, but indifference toward what does not merit the investment of your neural energy. Common men waste their limited cognitive resources defending themselves against the irrelevant. Opinions, gossip, internet comments, passing criticisms. The one who dominates selects his battles. He does not defend himself because he understands that to defend is to validate the attacker. He prefers the silence that confuses the enemy over the argument that feeds him. His calm is not passivity. It is an aggressive strategy of conservation. In the game of power, whoever conserves their calm amidst the chaos always dictates the outcome. Mental dominion converts time into an ally. The impulsive demand immediate results. They are slaves to the present moment. The strategist knows how to wait. Waiting, when it is intentional, becomes a form of psychological pressure on others. The one who dominates understands that power accumulates in the vacuum of silence. Every time you choose not to react, the other person reveals a little more of themselves. Every pause you create forces the other to fill it with their insecurity. And right there, without effort, you govern. Machiavelli famously advised that the wise man must know how to feign, but never be feigned. This is a critical distinction in social psychology. It means you must be able to wear the mask of social convention, to play the game, but never allow the mask to fuse with your face. You use the art of control without losing your essence, because dominion without purpose is merely tyranny, and a mind without purpose becomes an autoimmune disease. It attacks itself. Therefore, dark psychology must be utilized as a shield, not a sword. A shield against emotional manipulation, against imposed narratives, against the learned helplessness that schools and media instill in you. Dominating your mind does not make you cruel. It makes you free. And freedom, in a world of mental slaves, is the most subversive act that exists. When you reach this point, the world ceases to be a threat. You no longer live on the defensive, because nothing can disturb you if you do not authorize it. Chaos becomes merely a landscape. Attacks become data points. Pain becomes information. With every new comprehension, your mind becomes sharper, more stable, more anti-fragile. The weak break under stress. The dominant gets stronger because of it. The danger is no longer in the one who shouts, but in the one who understands. That silent comprehension is the ultimate weapon, because while others seek to impose their will, you learn to direct the flow of events. There is a moment when mental dominion ceases to be an effort and becomes presence. You no longer analyze to understand. You understand naturally through implicit learning. You no longer control to dominate. You dominate because you have reached the point where nothing can control you. This is the supreme state of the strategist. Absolute serenity in the middle of the burning building. A calm so profound that it disconcerts others because they cannot manipulate what does not react. They cannot hurt someone who does not depend on their approval. They cannot defeat someone who has already conquered their own mind. This is the true mental trick. It is not about imposing force. It is about becoming force. It is about your mere existence serving as a reminder that real power makes no noise. Dominion is not announced. It is perceived. The one who dominates does not seek to demonstrate intelligence. He demonstrates influence. He does not need to be right because his reason converts into reality through action. Every word of his weighs more than 1,000 words of the others, not because he speaks louder, but because his voice comes from an imperturbable center, an internal locus of control. The mind that dominates does not desire approval. It desires internal order. And that order, when it is total, turns you into a magnet. People feel your presence as something they cannot define, a mixture of respect, curiosity, and primal fear. They respect your calm. They fear your clarity, because in a world of agitated minds, serenity is perceived as a supernatural power. But it is not magic. It is discipline. The discipline of observing before acting, of silencing before responding, of thinking before deciding. The majority operate under the fallacy that dominating the mind is suppressing emotions. Error. Dominating the mind is allowing yourself to feel, but choosing how and when to discharge that energy. It is like a river that flows with violence, but one that you decide where to irrigate. Whoever controls their emotions controls their energy, and whoever controls their energy controls their destiny. There is no strength without sensitivity, but there is no survival without limits. The balance between the two is true mastery. Remember this final lesson. Mental power is not measured by how much you resist, but by how much you comprehend. The more you understand yourself, the less the world disturbs you. Every emotional wound stops being a scar and becomes a lesson in neurobiology. Every error stops being guilt and transforms into calibration. The one who dominates his mind no longer seeks someone to blame. He seeks the variable he missed. He does not flee from conflict. He observes it until he understands its root, because he knows that every external conflict is merely a projection of an internal one, not yet resolved. Dominating the mind is facing yourself, facing the part of you that fears, doubts, and self-sabotages, and defeating it not once, but every single day. Every morning, when laziness whispers that you should sleep more. Every night, when fear tells you that you are not enough. Every decision where the ego wants to take the wheel. Mental dominion is not achieved in an instant of enlightenment. It is forged in thousands of small, invisible battles that no one sees. This is why the masses never reach it, because it is easier to blame the system than to look in the mirror without excuses. The mental Machiavellian understands that the most dangerous enemy is not outside the gates. It is inside the fortress. Self-destruction is far more common than oppression. Men lose power not because others take it, but because they surrender it with every impulsive reaction, with every doubt, with every poorly directed word. Therefore, dominion begins with a silent declaration. I will not react. I will observe. I will calculate. And by repeating it, the mind begins to obey. The mental trick is perfected with time. At first, it is conscious effort. Then, it becomes habit. And finally, it becomes identity. You no longer have to remember to stay in control, because control has become your nature. And when you arrive there, life becomes a canvas where every movement you make generates an effect. People adjust to your rhythm. The environment responds to your gravity. You no longer follow circumstances. You create them. But there is a paradox that few comprehend. True dominion does not seek to dominate others. The one who dominates out of need is still a slave to the desire for control. The one who dominates out of consciousness, however, does not need to subjugate anyone. His power lies in his absolute independence. The world can collapse around him, and he will remain firm, because his stability does not depend on external order, but on internal equilibrium. Here is where psychological Machiavellianism becomes philosophy. It is no longer about manipulating others. It is about being so lucid that no one can manipulate you. You no longer need masks, because you are capable of using them without forgetting who lies beneath. You no longer fear losing, because you understand that the man who can start from zero without losing his calm is the man who has already won. And at that point, something changes in your gaze. You stop seeing people as enemies or allies, and you see them as projections. Every person who crosses your path reveals a part of you, your past, your fears, your limits. The strategist does not get angry with others. He observes himself through others. He uses the reactions of the crowd as a mirror of his own mental state. If something manages to irritate you, there is still dominion to be reached. If something seduces you easily, there is still desire to be comprehended. Every interaction becomes a training ground. Mental dominion is not coldness, it is clarity. And clarity makes you impenetrable because no one can control a man who already knows himself. You can deceive an ignorant man, confuse an impulsive man, or intimidate an insecure man. But facing an awakened mind, all manipulation disarms itself. The awakened mind sees the intention and, without resistance, lets it fall. And that is what terrifies the manipulator the most, that his victim does not react, but smiles. When you reach this level, you discover that mental power has an inevitable consequence: solitude, not because the world rejects you, but because you no longer need to belong to the herd to feel safe. And that independence scares them, because the majority only know how to live inside a shared cage. But you, who have broken yours, know that there is no freedom without detachment. The one who dominates his mind does not seek company to feel complete. He seeks it to share his fullness. And that difference separates those who imitate power from those who possess it. This is how a dominant mind awakens. First, it doubts. Then, it observes. Then, it trains. And finally, it reigns. And when it reigns, it does not need to say so. Because real power needs no introduction. It only needs presence. The mental trick, then, is not a technique or a secret. It is a metamorphosis. Wake up, observe, dominate, and never again will you be manipulated by the world, because the world will bend before your clarity. And when you arrive there, remember this final truth. The man who dominates his mind needs neither fortune, nor fame, nor followers, because he has already conquered the only thing the rest of the world does not even know they have lost: his own will.